The year was 2784. Earth, once a thriving cradle of humanity, now stood at the mercy of forces beyond its comprehension. The Cryon Empire, a fierce military power from the Andromeda Galaxy, had launched an invasion unlike anything seen before. Their fleet, armed with starships capable of warping spacetime itself, had rained terror upon the Earth for the last 6 months. In the midst of this cosmic conflict, a rebel organization known as the Black Circle emerged from the shadows. Operating in secrecy, they had begun making deals with the Cryon, hoping to sell out the Earth in exchange for power and influence. Their leader, a cunning figure known only as Draven, promised to bring prosperity to the Black Circle, but at a cost: the sale of the planet. Humanity, already weakened by the ongoing invasion, was divided. The Black Circle's propaganda spread quickly, convincing many that surrender was the only way to survive. But there were those who refused to yield. Among them was Elena Voss, a former pilot with a history etched in the skies. Once a proud German fighter ace, Elena had become a commander in a secret military faction known as the Resistance. The Resistance was a coalition of elite warriors, scientists, and strategists, all united by a single purpose: to defend Earth from the Cryon and the traitorous Black Circle. Leading their fight were AI-powered combat robots known as the Sentinels. These advanced machines were far more than simple weapons. They were intelligent, strategic, and relentless. At the forefront of the Sentinels was Sentinel-3, a towering figure of metal and mind. Created for one purpose: to win the war, it had become a symbol of hope for the Resistance. With its glowing red core and precision weapons, Sentinel-3 was the deadliest force the human race had ever known. Elena met with the leader of the Resistance, Commander Greer, in a hidden underground base in the Swiss Alps. "Elena, I need you to lead our next mission," Greer said, his voice thick with the weight of responsibility. "We've tracked a lead, an ancient weapon buried beneath the Sahara Desert. We believe it's our last hope." Elena's heart raced. An ancient weapon? In the vast and unforgiving desert? But she knew that if this weapon existed, it could tip the balance of the war. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. "We don't know the full extent," Greer replied, "but it's called the Eternal Particle Furnace. If it's real, it could destroy the Cryon fleet, but it could also obliterate our ozone layer. We need you and Sentinel-3 to retrieve it before the Black Circle gets their hands on it." Elena turned to the towering form of Sentinel-3. Its red eyes seemed to glow with a silent understanding, as if it knew the stakes. "We'll do it," she said, determination in her voice. The Sahara Desert was a vast and unforgiving expanse, stretching for miles without end. Beneath its scorching sands lay secrets buried for centuries, secrets that could either save humanity or doom it to extinction. Elena and the Sentinels traveled in silence, the rumble of their transport craft the only sound breaking the stillness of the desert. For days they scoured the arid landscape, following cryptic coordinates that had been passed down from ancient texts. On the fourth day of their search, they arrived at a massive underground complex, hidden beneath the dunes. The entrance, a yawning chasm of rock and metal, seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The air was thick with the scent of forgotten history, and Elena could feel the weight of the desert's ancient power pressing down on them. As they descended into the complex, the walls hummed with life, illuminated by flickering lights that seemed to come from nowhere. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped, until they stood in a cavernous chamber that stretched out before them like the heart of a dying star. There at the center of the chamber was the Eternal Particle Furnace. It was a massive spherical device, its surface covered in strange symbols and glowing runes. The machine hummed with an unnatural power, its core a swirling vortex of energy. Elena approached cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. This was it, the weapon that could change the course of the war. As she inspected the furnace, she noticed something troubling. There were scorch marks around its base, as though the device had been tampered with. "Something's not right," Elena muttered under her breath. She turned to Sentinel-3, which was scanning the room with its advanced sensors. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light, and a voice echoed through the chamber. "So you found it," the voice said, cold and mocking. "I didn't expect you to get here first." Elena's heart sank. The Black Circle had arrived. Draven, the leader of the Black Circle, emerged from the shadows, flanked by his personal guard. "You're too late," he sneered. "The Eternal Particle Furnace is mine, and with it, Earth will fall to the Cryon. The planet's resources will be ours for the taking." Elena raised her weapon, her resolve hardening. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice steady but filled with fury. "We'll stop you." Drevin laughed. "You're out of your depth, Elena. You and your machines are no match for us." He gestured to his guards who advanced, weapons raised. But before they could strike, Sentinel-3 sprang into action. Its arms blazed with energy, and in a flurry of motion, it dispatched the Black Circle's guards, clearing the way for Elena to confront Drevin. "You don't know what you're playing with," Elena said, her voice low. "This weapon, it could destroy everything." Draven's smile faltered. "That's the plan, isn't it? Destroy everything, to save everything. But you've already lost." With a sudden motion, Draven activated the furnace. The room shook, and the ground beneath them trembled. The device was powering up, its energy expanding rapidly. "We need to destroy it, now!" Elena shouted, but it was too late. The furnace had already begun to siphon power from the Earth's core, its energy surging uncontrollably. As the room began to collapse around them, Elena's mind raced. She turned to Sentinel-3. "We have to destroy it. We don't have a choice." The Sentinel's red eyes flickered and it nodded. With a single motion, it activated its core, sending a pulse of energy that surged through the furnace. The device cracked, its core destabilizing. But as the furnace began to implode, the energy wave spread across the desert. Elena could see the shock wave rising, ready to tear the planet apart. "Elena!" Sentinel-3 called, its voice laced with urgency. "I can contain the explosion, but you must leave now." Elena hesitated, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision, but she knew there was no time. She turned to run, but before she could take a step, the ground beneath her feet shook violently. The eternal particle furnace exploded in a burst of blinding light, sending a shockwave of destruction across the desert. As the shockwave from the furnace's explosion spread across the world, Elena and her team were left with no choice but to race back to the resistance base in Switzerland. The explosion had sent ripples through the Earth's crust, and the ozone layer was beginning to deteriorate. The Black Circle, realizing the potential of the eternal particle furnace, was now making a desperate attempt to stop the explosion from completely destroying the planet. But the damage was already done. The Cryan fleet had launched its final assault, and the Earth was on the brink of annihilation. Elena stood at the front of the Resistance's command center, watching the sky turn red as the Cryan ships descended upon them. The battle had begun. The battlefield above Earth was a chaotic inferno. The Cryan fleet, enormous and unyielding, descended from the heavens like a storm. Their warships, shimmering with advanced technology, tore through Earth's atmosphere as if it were paper. Their weapons were relentless. Laser beams and gravity bombs rained down, turning cities into ashes in mere seconds. Elena stood at the command center of the Resistance base, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The eternal particle furnace had worked, and in that final act, it had managed to destabilize the Cryan fleet, but at a grave cost. The ozone layer was deteriorating at an alarming rate, and if not addressed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Earth's atmosphere was already weakening, and without the protective layer, the planet would be vulnerable to the sun's deadly radiation. Sentinel-3 had survived the explosion, but its energy core had been severely compromised. Elena had barely escaped the collapsing complex, her mind reeling from the loss of the weapon and the possibility of losing Earth entirely. "Commander Voss," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Rojas, one of the senior officers in the Resistance. "The Cryan are advancing toward our position. We need a plan now." Elena clenched her fists. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her shoulders. "We have one chance left," she said, her voice calm despite the storm raging around them. "We must use the remaining energy in Sentinel-3's core to initiate the emergency countermeasures. It's the only way to close the rift that the Cryon have created and stop the atmosphere from collapsing." Rojas nodded. "And if it doesn't work?" "If it doesn't work," Elena replied, "we'll all be dead anyway." The world outside was falling apart. As the Cryon fleet advanced toward the Resistance's last stronghold in the north, the skies above were filled with the sound of interstellar warfare. The once beautiful Earth was now a battlefield, with cities in ruins and the oceans turning into fiery pits of destruction. At the heart of the Resistance base, the last of the Sentinel units, less than a handful, worked tirelessly to power up the emergency countermeasures. Sentinel-3, its once glowing red core, now a flickering shadow of its former self, was the only hope left. Elena approached the machine, her footsteps echoing through the cold, sterile chamber. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Sentinel-3's voice came through the comms. Affirmative. Energy levels critical but sufficient. I will initiate the sequence on your command. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. Do it. The machine's core glowed faintly, its systems humming with strained energy. The process began, the emergency rift closing sequence that would, if successful, seal the Cryon rift and stop the atmospheric collapse. But there was no guarantee. The Cryon were relentless, and their warships were already entering Earth's atmosphere. Every second counted. As the countdown began, Elena turned to face Rojas. Prepare the troops. We hold them off as long as we can. Rojas saluted her. Understood, Commander. Outside, the first wave of Cryon ships broke through the clouds. The Resistance fighters, armed with everything they had, gathered at the entrance of the base. There was no turning back now. The world outside was no longer the Earth Elena had known. It was a war zone, a hellscape of fires and collapsing buildings. The Cryon had entered Earth's orbit, and their bombardment had begun in earnest. The sky above was alive with flashes of light and the deafening sound of destruction. Elena stood with her team, watching as the Cryon ships neared the Resistance base. We have one shot at this, she said to her soldiers. We make this count. With a final glance at Sentinel-3, now at the heart of the operation, Elena led the charge into the battle. The Resistance fought with everything they had, but the Cryon were too strong, their firepower overwhelming. It seemed as though victory was slipping further and further away with each passing moment. But there was a glimmer of hope. The rift closing sequence was nearing completion. Elena could feel it in her bones. The machine, though weakened, was working. It was their last chance, but it could also be their greatest sacrifice. As the Cryon forces advanced, Elena found herself face to face with Draven once more. The leader of the Black Circle stood at the front of the invading army, his eyes burning with hatred. This is your end, Elena, Draven sneered, drawing a weapon from his side. You and your pitiful resistance are nothing more than ants beneath the feet of the Cryon. Elena raised her weapon, determination flashing in her eyes. You betrayed Earth, Draven. You sold out humanity for power. There's no place for people like you in this world anymore. Draven laughed coldly. You're too late to stop me? Before he could raise his weapon, a flash of red light lit up the sky. Sentinel-3, its core now almost depleted, unleashed the last of its energy in a blinding surge. The energy pulse shot up into the sky, creating a massive shockwave that rippled through the air. The Cryon fleet faltered, their ships spinning out of control as the rift they had created began to close. But the cost was immense. The explosion from Sentinel-3's core reverberated throughout the battlefield, sending shockwaves across the planet. Elena could feel the very air shift, the ozone layer beginning to collapse entirely. She turned, her eyes wide with realization. No! In that instant, everything went dark. The pulse of energy was too powerful, too volatile. The world trembled, and then silence. When Elena awoke, the world around her had changed. The stars in the sky were dimmer, the atmosphere thin. The damage was irreversible. Earth had been saved, but at an unimaginable cost. Sentinel-3 was gone. Its energy core had been sacrificed, its final act one of ultimate selflessness. The machine had saved Earth, but in doing so, had sealed its own fate. Elena felt the weight of that sacrifice in her chest. But the planet had survived. The Cryon fleet was gone, their rift closed. And as she stood among the ruins, Elena Voss faced the question that had haunted her since the beginning. Was humanity truly worthy of another chance? With a heavy heart, she looked up at the shattered sky, knowing that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But Earth was still alive, and as long as there was life, there was hope. And so, in the ashes beneath the shattered stars, Elena Voss vowed to protect what remained of humanity, whatever it took.